today we've got Annette Webb with us from Raw Sustainable Living. She's going to talk to us about building healthy soils. We're thinking about gardening. Last week we had AJ Delgadillo talking to us about composting with worms, vermicomposting or vermiculture as a way to deal with some of the solid waste we produce and turn it into fantastic soil amendments. And Annette, I think today is going to kind of take us a step further about how to build our soils so that we can produce good, delicious, nutritious foods and probably some other things as well. I've been aware of Annette in some different ways for several years, and so I think I'll just turn it over to you now, Annette. And, you've got a bit of a presentation. I know you can take us through that, or just start however is natural to you, and we'll go from there.
Oh, that's a loaded question. You might regret that. No, I can go off on little tangents on things. But first of all, thank you, and thank you to everybody that's tuned in. I feel honored and grateful whenever I get the opportunity to speak and talk, because I truly feel fortunate to be where I'm at, and it's not it's everybody that I've come in contact with that have taught me. So it's been a learning experience, and which you'll see in the slideshow. I kind of talk about that a little bit, but we might just start with the PowerPoint and then we'll go, because it kind of jumps all over. So
all right,
yay. Okay, I know I used to call my presentation the scoop on worm poop, because it was a journey for me. It was a journey to go from using it to what I know it is now. And so, and like I said, there's no one way to describe me. I kind of came up with this and thought I'm going to go with it because people need to be inspired, or I want them to be inspired to grow things, that it's not done in any certain way. We see these gardens and they're perfectly brown with a solitary plant. That's not, to me, that's a great garden, but we can do it with weeds. There's no one way to do it. So we all learn from each other. And so that's part of where I'm at today. You can go on to the next one. I call this edition my 6th grade edition. And it's not because I think I'm in 6th grade or anybody else is in 6th grade. It's because I feel like every year that I've been in this business has been like a school year. So I've taken tests and I've gotten graded and I'll learn things and I've made mistakes, and it's just been an amazing journey. So I'm in 6th grade right now. And so, and next year will be the next, and I just keep going from there. So I feel grateful, and you can go on. Usually when I'm speaking, I tell people, please stop me, please ask, because I get so excited and I talk, and then you might forget your question. But in this kind of format, it actually may work that you could type in a question and then I'll answer it in a little bit. But I feel like that lottery ticket is me. You guys chose to tune into this today, so I feel so fortunate, and I want to give you all I can to teach you and inspire you to do what you need to do. But a little bit of background. I'm a local girl. I was a tomboy. I graduated from Northridge High School in 1988. A little side note, I was on a state champion softball team in 1988, if anybody remembers that girls softball team from Middlebury. So one of my little claim to fame. But I chose a path as a hygienist, did that for about 20 some years, and play gardens on and off. I had this awful childhood. I mean, horrible, right? My parents had this huge garden. We had to plant the seeds, and then we had to pick the beans, and then we had to snap them, and then we got to can them. And you know what? That winter we ate on them, and they tasted really, really good. So it seemed really hard when I was little, but I'm so grateful that I have that background, that that I got to dig in the soil as a little kid. So I thank my parents for that. But yeah, you can go on to the next one. So after kind of dental hygiene, I kind of started looking into some other options. Health situation, it wasn't feasibly for me to still work, and so I started looking into things that I enjoyed, and then the gardening was one of it, and learning about the worm business and using it. But in 2015, I became a master naturalist. And you talk about an explosion going off. It was like amazing. I learned all these things that were growing around me, and what they meant to the insects and the wildlife, and what they could put back into the world that we've created. It inspired me, and it's so exciting. I didn't have the background. I was selling worm poop for a living, but I had a hygiene background. So I took the Master Gardener program. So there I learned about NPK and fertilizers and pesticides. Oh, please don't ask, because I don't remember all those concoctions, but it did give me that little bit of background that I needed too. So, and you can go on to the next one. So I came up with this crazy idea. I started using this stuff. I had an issue with my garden. They wanted me to put some chemical on it, but I couldn't eat my fruit for a couple of days. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I'm doing this because I want to be organic. So I heard about this stuff called worm poop, worm castings, and I started growing it, and my plants went crazy. All I did is throw it on there. It was like super easy. So long story short, got to know the owner. Unfortunately, she was injured and not able to run it. So I talked my husband into buying the worm farm. And so you can see the picture. That is actually our part of our worm farm in that slide right there. We decided to name the company Raw Sustainable Living. My husband's name Robert, I'm Annette, and our last name is Webb. So it just kind of worked. So about 2015 is when we bought the worm company. And you can go on to the next slide. So I went around to businesses and I'm saying, hey, I'm Annette. Hey, I'm selling you the worm castings. And they just kind of looked at me and went, okay. They don't really sell. I'm like, what? Why aren't you guys using this? This stuff is amazing, but they just didn't know what it was. And truthfully, I didn't know what it was either. It was labeled, the old bag said it was a fertilizer, but then, people are saying, well, it's worm poop, worm castings. Okay, that's the proper name. And I'm like, well, whatever. It's worm poop. Okay, it's manure, it's dung, it's poo, it's number 2. I'm a farm girl. I know what that stuff is, right? So you can go on to the next slide. So I started asking people and asking around and started experimenting. And some of these pictures I did, I was just blown away. I was like, I just put a little bit of this stuff on and it worked. These are some pictures that I did early on. And I have to tell the story about this fern in that lower left because it's one of my favorite ones. It was a gardener, a greenhouse in Middlebury, an Amish guy. And he got a sample of one of my bags somewhere and he put that on one plant and not the other. And you can see that was 1 week difference. And he was like, he called me and he said, what is this stuff? And at that time, I still was like, well, it's worm poo. Is it okay to say poop to an Amish guy? I'm thinking all these things, but I went out there and I told him, I said, it's an amendment, whatever that is. So you can go on to the next slide. So I just kept asking questions like, how is this stuff working? Why is it working this well on this plant and not that one, And so in my brain, I'm trying to figure this stuff out. I'm like, I know what manure is, I grew up walking around cow patties, they're stinky manure, but I knew they were hot. And most manures are hot and they would burn a plant, but yet I'm selling worm poop, which is manure. But I just didn't understand the format and where it was at. So I started asking customers, like my next slide. The next slide is a customer that actually became a good friend, and hopefully he's watching. If he is, hey Steve. But I said, Steve, I'm not getting this. I don't understand. Why isn't it a fertilizer? And he said, Annette, fertilizer feeds plants. Worm castings feed the soil. And that was Steve Cruz from Cruz Farm Supply. And I said, okay. I had no idea what he was talking about. Why would I want to feed my soil, So I started checking into what an amendment was, So an amendment is something you add to the soil to make it, to add organic matter, and it adds microbes. It just doesn't feed the plants in that way. And I went, okay. You go on to the next slide. So I started looking into, the different fertilizers. Well, we need fertilizers. It's food, right? Everybody needs to eat. And you can go on to the next one. But what I wasn't looking at is the big picture of the whole dynamic of what was going on. You can go on to the next one. I started looking at the woods and I'm like, wait a minute. We don't fertilize out there. All the leaves and debris. Whoop, go back one. Oh, yep. But anyways, that picture of that woods, and you could see everything falling and rotting down, and all these little bugs, the millipedes and the beetles and the earthworms and the microbes, they're breaking down all this organic matter and they're feeding these huge trees. Like, okay, so I get it. So I'm feeding these plants. I wasn't looking underneath the soil. So it was the springtails, the nematode, the protozoa, the fungi, the mites. That's where the worm castings come in. And you can go on to the next one. So the worm castings actually have all those microbes in their gut. And so when you add it to the plant, it starts breaking down the organic matter and feeding the plant. It's part of what's called a soil food web. And so you have plants with the organic matter, the compost that you put around your plants. Well, here come the bacteria, then the protozoa and the nematodes and the fungi. And when they do, they're consuming each other. And when they do, they die and they release plant readily available food. So it's part of a soil food web. It circles each other and feeds each other. So you can go on to the next slide. So I get really excited about this, and it's kind of like one of those high school slides, like, oh, is she gonna make me memorize this? No, but I love this slide because if you can take one thing away from this presentation, the next time you're walking in your yard or the forest, take 3 steps. Then I want you to remember that you are walking over, on average, now we're talking 3 feet of soil, 3 feet deep, okay? You're walking on average over 10 trillion bacteria, 10 billion protozoa, 5 million nematodes, 100,000 mites, 50,000 springtails, 10,000 rotifers, 5,000 insects, 3,000 worms, 100 snails and slugs, and 1 vertebrae. Every 3 feet. That's on average. And what they're doing, they have a connection. They have a world. There's a whole community down there, and they're all feeding and eating each other and producing plant readily available food. So that's where the worm castings come in, because worm castings in their gut put out these little microbes, just like our gut. We've all heard about the microbiome and what's going on out there, right? Well, the worms actually produce it in their poop. Yay! So the worm castings are alive, and it's got all these microbes in it. So that's why when you add it to your soil, it's not a fertilizer. And you can go on to the next slide. So it's adding all these little microbes down in there. So your soil is alive. It's alive. It's not dead. Dirt is dead. There's nothing. There's no life in it. It's dry, it's crumbly, it's brown. Where soil's alive. It's brown, it's healthy, and there's microbes in it. Don't you love that little guy there? Worm on poop scoop. You can go on to the next slide. And so your soil's alive. So what you're doing is you're feeding it. If you took 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, on average, there's between 100 million and 1 billion individual bacteria. Really? look what this COVID, look what one virus has done to us. This is 100 million to 1 billion different ones. That's crazy, right? 1 teaspoon. So it's a pretty big little community, down there that we are just touching on the soil secrets and what it can produce. But you can go on. So, I do want to, can I have you go back a few slides? There was something I forgot to say. Yep, keep going. One more, yep. It's a picture of a plant. One more maybe. One more. Maybe it's at the end. Oh, you know what? Maybe I shrunk my program. We'll go back to where we were. But what I want to tell you, when we think about fertilizing, I'm not against any fertilizers. People are thinking I'm always against that. Plants need nutrients, and we put them into the ground, into a place where they don't always grow. So, you may need to amend the soil and help them grow. But I do know when you feed the soil, you're going to feed the plants for longer term. When you fertilize, you're giving yes, right there is fine, you can stay. So when you fertilize, you're giving the plants all the nutrients it's supposed to eat, and it can't uptake it. So Erin, that would be like me taking all the food you're going to eat today. I'm going to put it right here. I want you to eat it right now. You physically couldn't do it. You could take up maybe 20%, you could take a little bit. The rest is washed off. So it's wasted, it's polluting the watershed, it's polluting, it's killing the other microbes because it's so toxic. So when you feed the soil, you're going to feed that soil food web. So that's why you don't burn plants with worm castings, because technically it's not a fertilizer. It's going to feed the soil that in turn the plants. So that's my understand that I didn't sell a fertilizer. You know, I sell a soil amendment. And yeah, hopefully I'm not losing you. I just saw something pop up. Can you hear me okay still? Oh, there, are you there?
Sorry, that's great. That's great.
Okay, so
Yep.
I think somebody called on the phone. So that's my whole scoop on how I learned that I bought a company selling worm, a fertilizer to an amendment that's opened up this whole, new world of life to me all around me. And I appreciate when people want to, and see it. So I'll just take the presentation into the next, and it's super easy. I think I have one slide on it, but the number one question people get, how do I use this stuff? Well, it's super easy. Just get it on your plants. So you go on to the next one. Basically, when you're planting, this is a perfect time. I usually say it's 3 times a year. It's when you first plant the plant, and then when it blooms, and then when it produces its fruit or vegetable. So basically, when you have your starter plants there, you'll dig a hole and you'll just throw a handful in and put your plant right on top of it, and you'll cover with soil. When that plant starts to bloom, you'll add another handful. Oop, go back to that. Yep. You'll add another handful, and then when it produces, so you'll just add. If you can go back one slide. Yeah, you'll just add a handful around the base of the plant. I say a handful, but I don't really know. There's no. Every plant is different. Oh, there you go. There you go. So usually what I say is try to cover around the base of the plant. If you want to work it in the soil a little bit, that's fine. Or if you want to dig a furrow and line it with your worm castings and then put your seeds on it and then cover it up, great.
Hey,
those are all you need. Yeah.
There's a question here asking.
Yeah.
Let's see. Nedra is asking, can I add this directly to my compost bin?
Absolutely. Oh yes. It will help the compost break down faster. So
Okay.
if you find your compost isn't breaking down, it will add those microbes. So yeah, throw some handfuls every couple layers. Great question. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, good. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Oh, no, please, like I said, I love questions. At this format, it's a little different, where before I can just, if someone's looking at me, I can kind of sense it. I'm such a people person. This is just killing me in some ways, because I just love people. So I appreciate that you give me this chance to get out and kind of talk to people, because I do miss it. You can keep going on in that.
And since I've interrupted you, let me ask another question here too.
Yeah.
Are there certain plants that this kind of amendment is more valuable for? Certain vegetables or perennials, shrubs or trees? What would you say?
Oh, great question. I have no idea. I don't,
Okay.
That is a great question. And, I over the years, I do all kinds of experiments, so I feel like I have my soil amended, I've compost, I've done all these right things, right? I've used my worm casting. I'll have plants that are, 5-10 feet apart that look like they're a month different in age because of how they're growing. And so to me, I didn't do anything to this soil that I did differently over there. It's just if those nutrients are plant readily available. So there's no plants that it won't. I shouldn't say there's no plants, but there's air plants. Air plants have no roots. So you couldn't, air plants. I'm not sure about water plants, but as far as that, there's no plants that you can't use it on that I know of. If someone knows any different, please let me know, because I will tell people that. But there's nothing more than that. So yeah, great question.
All right, go on.
Okay, you want me to keep going? The one picture, the lower right picture, is another one that I love. That was one of the first years we owned the company, and it was 2, I don't remember what kind of plants, flowers. And I take them around, I go, oh, here's one with worm castings, here's one without, and of course it was bigger and greener and bigger, prettier. And towards the end of the season, I thought, oh, I'm gonna put you in the ground. I need to let you grow a little bit. I'm tired of you, feeling that hot. I took that out and I went, Mom, my mom was there. I go, Mom, look at the difference in these roots of these plants. And all I did is use 1/3 worm castings and 2/3 potting mix. Well, you know, yeah, it looks root bound. It's not quite. White roots are very healthy. So you can see it was a very healthy roots, but I guarantee you that plant in troubled times, when it's drought and it's trying to survive, that plant's going to thrive over one that doesn't. And that's just because of, you know, the worm castings and the microbes allow that plant to just flourish and be healthier. It helps it ward off diseases. I was told, so, you know, plants put out an exudate, which is like a sugar. Bacteria love that. And I told you how many bacteria are in the soil, right? So the bacteria go there, and that's a food source. Oh, the exudate, the sugar, right? And so they're going to protect it and they're going to eat it. Well, then comes the nematodes, and then they're going to protect their food source. So the plants that grown with the worm castings tend to be more disease resistant, because that was another like aha moment. People would ask me, well, what do you do for this? Or what do you do for that? I'm like, I never had that. Never had it. It's not, it just was maybe luck. I don't know, but I have to believe the worm castings had a big part of that. So yeah, so I could tell you about my farm there, or our farm. You could go on to the next one. So our farm's way different than AJ's. AJ does the food scrap, and I get asked that all the time. Actually, yeah, go back one more. So our system is different, and love you, AJ. You do a great job. Keep up the good work. He's taking all the food scraps in, and I would love to be able to do that, but on this level, we can't. We have way too many worms. When we're at our peak, we're not always at our peak. We go up and down. We have around 30,000 worms, Bob. My husband's over here. So we have around 30,000 worms. So I would love to cut up all that scrap and give to him, but it's just not feasible in this type of system that we have. So in our buckets, you can see in that picture, I've got one right here. These are worm condos. I call them condos. So on average, there should be about 250 worms in here. I am a huge animal lover, and at first I'm like, oh, this is so sad, they're in cages, but they're colony animals, so they do like being around each other. Plus, you know, I think, hey, you know what, they're pooping out a lot of really good microbes that's not going to kill if somebody uses chemicals or some other kind of treatment. So I offset it, you know, with that. But anyway, so we have, you go on to the next one. That's a picture of our worms. We use African night crawlers. The reason we do is because that's what the previous owner had. But the reason the African night crawlers that we do them, and like AJ uses, I believe he uses like red wigglers. African night crawlers poop 1.5 times they eat 1.5 times their weight a day. So you know what happens when you eat a lot? You poop a lot more, right? So they produce a lot more waste. So on average, you know, these buckets, you know, will develop about 2 weeks, they'll make about 7 to 8 pounds of castings in one bucket. So it's a really high turnover rate. They're African night crawlers, so we have to keep it warm in here. So that's why I brought you guys in here so you can see I'm constantly growing plants back here. I love natives, and so we've started a whole bunch of natives, and I've been starting some stuff for my good friend Chelsea, if she's watching, at Seed to Feed, so she can you know, help feed the food bank too. But we do have to keep the lights on. African night crawlers are really adventurous. So if we go without lights, they will eventually crawl out of their buckets. So we keep a light on them. This picture is actually a video. I don't know if we can play it with this format, but my husband is walking around a measured amount of peat moss, and he's feeding our worms. So we feed them wheat, barley, soy, alfalfa, limestone, and yeast culture. So like worms are like chickens. They have gizzards, so they grind up their food. So that's where the limestone comes in, but it's a powder. And so we get it from an organic feed mill. We have an organic feed mill in northern Indiana, you guys. If you guys have chickens and home things, there's an organic feed mill in Walketville. It's Wolf Co-op, and so they will make your own chicken food organic if you want. You'd have to go a long ways to find another one. So I hope you guys check out that source. But here's our worm food. It's actually just grains, it's powder. But in that picture, we measure out a certain amount of worm food according to how many buckets that we're doing. So right there, my husband's shaking that container of worm food in there, that he uses that scooper, I do, and we scoop that up and use it into that black or the blue machine that's behind it, and that pulverizes it and mixes it all up. So Teresa, I don't know if you can play that video. If not, we can go on to the next one. But we make that bedding and we fill that bedding up in a bucket. And so we'll fill, after it goes through this process, there he goes, there he is. And so we fill this up with about 10 pounds of that mixture there. And then we'll put the worms, we'll harvest, which I'm going to show you here in a minute. And so the worms will fall on top and they'll live there for 2 weeks. So we were pretty excited and we thought, oh, we could be farmers? Are you kidding? We can leave our farm for 2 weeks. All we have to do is make sure they have lights on and they're warm. So we don't have to water them. We don't have to milk them. We don't have to feed them. We can leave them for 2 weeks. So as long as they're happy. But yeah, so there he is, the picture on the left. It's actually a video where he's taking it and he's scooping it into that pulverizer. And then we take it out. And like I said, we fill it up here. The picture on the upper right is our harvester. And so that is how we separate the worm castings from the worms, from the bits of material that they don't eat. We catch it in a tote underneath it. That's that black tote. And we get about 75, 80 pounds. We pull it out and we lift it up and we put it into a bin. And then we take it and we bag it. We bag it and we sell it locally to retailers. There's one thing in this company, it's against the law for me to do. I'm not allowed to do these bags. I can't seal them correctly. So my husband gets to do the bag sealing. But so we have 5 and 25-pound bags that we sell. So you can go on to the next slide.
Hey, Annette, let me interrupt here once.
Yeah.
Question asking about the night crawlers, African night crawlers.
Mm-hmm.
Are you concerned about them getting released into our native soils, our so-called native soils?
Great.
They may be disruptive to some of our forest ecosystems.
Yeah, great question. And I get that. And you know what? I'm a master naturalist. And if I thought that was the case, I'd go fishing with them myself. And that's serious because I've been a vegan. I'm a vegan, so I won't be fishing with them. No, the African night crawlers cannot live in our environment. 60 degrees, they're lethargic. 55, they are almost dead. So there's no way they could live through the summer. They can produce all their babies. They're all going to die. I've watched them. I've seen them die. We have to keep this room closed or they die. On the other side, they can't be too hot. We have actually had it at our old building, too hot, where they didn't like it either. That got way too warm. So great question. And here, what else I learned. There are no native earthworms in Indiana, Michigan. None of our earthworms around here are native. Our native earthworms were killed by the ice ages. So what is here was brought in by settlers. So I've researched, I've asked, bug people from different universities, and all of them, have told me that same story. So our native earthworms here are in no jeopardy. That's a different case. I know up in Boundary Waters in Wisconsin, Michigan, that's a different type of, I think, worm invasive species. But no, not these. These are they're great because they produce a lot of worm castings, but their balance is tough. We need to keep them warm and moist and happy and things like that. But great question.
So our climate, especially our winter climate, is still too cold for them to winter over.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I've read it over and over, and I've tried it. I've watched them. They cannot take the cold. They'll crawl, like they're surface feeders, so they go up and down. So one of the buckets, or one of the pictures earlier, I showed our buckets will get a whole bunch of worm castings on top because they're surface feeders. So they're not so smart. They'll go up there and freeze to death. And I realize I need to go back down. They are native to Africa. That's where they trace their genes. They are found down in Mexican Yucatan. Maybe, I don't know if it's even into Florida, but on average, I think they're moving about, what was it? It's crazy. It's 1 mile every 500 years. It's something crazy. These aren't aggressive type worms. you know, that they're going to be invasive, because like I said, I'm a huge master natural. I'm a naturalist and native person, so I wouldn't be part of this whole business if I knew I would endanger my local land. So this picture is actually, it's a video, is how we harvest. So we're taking the bucket there. It's set there for 2 weeks. You know, here's one. I don't know how well you guys can see. You'll start to see it looks like coffee grounds. And so they're all around the edge here. So all of this is actually just pure worm castings. So at the end of 2 weeks, we take it and we dump it through a harvester. It has a real tall, small screen on, kind of like AJ's. AJ had that little square thing. So he'll shake it and separate it. So this thing is, it shake, rattles, and rolls. And so the worm castings fall in that first green screen. The little lines you're seeing on that, those are the worms. So the next stage is where the, we call it refuge. It's the parts of the bedding that the worms don't eat. And then the worms go on to the end. Worms are hermaphrodites, so they have both female and male organs in them, but they just exchange fluids. And when they exchange fluids, then they have an egg, and their clitellum comes off and will form a cocoon. So they are very prolific. You know, so they'll produce a cocoon, and the cocoon can have 2 to 4 babies on average weekly. So that second screen is where the cocoons and the baby worms go. So and I don't know if you can see in my background there, we do have some nurseries going, because we're always replenishing the worms. They live about, I've read, anywhere 5 to 8 years. I don't know. I can't keep track of them. As much as I love animals, I can't keep track of them. Too many. We do count them though. We have a system in our rotation of our pallets that we do. Each bucket has to be counted about every 2 to 3 months. And we count them 1 worm, 2 worms, 3 worms at a time. There's no fast way around it, but yeah. I think we're about at the end. I don't know, do I have another slide? I can't remember. Yeah. Oh, there's a video. Yeah. So this is the harvesting. It takes, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds to a minute to run. People ask, the worms don't like it, but it doesn't hurt them. So this bucket in particular, we let it run down. And so then we take that tote and we'll take them, and we were going to count them at that time and just see. How's that? Yeah, so I thought that was, we're close to the end. So like I said, you know, the biggest, you know, one of my biggest things is I hope to inspire people to plant things. You know, I'm not one of those, I have to measure and I have to, you know, like apply something every 2 weeks. So the worm castings just fit into my lifestyle. I threw that worm poop on every 3 times a year, and my plants grow. And if I can inspire people to do that, I promise you it's rewarding. You know, don't beat yourself up if you have those weeds. Weeds are going to grow. Try stopping them. Last year I was at O'Hare Airport, miles of asphalt and concrete, and here's this big, you know, concrete thing with a light pole in it that had a crack this big, and it had a 3-foot plant coming out of it. So you think you're going to stop weeds? Good luck, because it's not going to happen. So don't beat yourself up. All right, weeds are going to happen. And they're the first part of like soil repair in itself. It's the first succession. So those things are going to grow. Chop them up and use them as compost. you know, let them, if you have a plant and you have a tomato and you grew 2 tomatoes on it, that's 2 more than you had. You know, one of my favorite all-time fruits is cantaloupe. I've been gardening my whole life. I've had one cantaloupe grow. I can't grow them. But that's okay. It's 1 more. So keep trying, everybody. Keep trying to grow. Don't beat yourself up if it's not perfect, because nature's not perfect. And, you know, I'm hearing more about these plants. When you give them everything that you need, you give them all the food, all the light, all the perfect conditions. It's kind of like having a spoiled, you know, a kid that you give everything to. You know, when these plants work to survive and grow, they're gonna produce fruit that is really healthy and can survive in all conditions. So I told you I get on my soapbox sometimes.
Well, that's great, Annette. We're getting a queue of questions here, so let me start picking through them here.
Okay.
First, a simple one here. Can you provide again the name of the organic feed mill?
Sure. It's Wolf Co-op. Hey Bob, could you go get that business card? It's in that there. So yeah, Wolf Co-op. It's in Walketville, Indiana.
Okay. All right.
So it's not far. But he'll get the information. So great. But yeah, they can make they make our worm food. So like when we order worm food, it's 500 pounds.
Okay.
So they'll make big batches of it.
So
And
they blend it for you?
Yeah, they blend it. We have to, it's a proprietary blend. It's a recipe that we actually use to make sure the worms get enough nutrients. So we have to have it at a certain percentage of protein, along with the limestone and other things in it. So they have the capability of doing that. So if you have your own little recipe for your own ducks or chickens or whatever, and they're local, they're enough organic growers around that will survive, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a cool thing. Yeah,
So
that's kind of the things I told you, like I learned. I love, like, oh wow, this is so cool. Yeah.
Here's the next question.
Yeah.
What are the benefits of worm castings compared to backyard compost? And that's coming from Lydia Dick all the way up in Canada.
Wow, in Canada. Wow, hi. Well, thank you for asking. Great question. I tell people worm castings are not the Miracle Grow. You know, we all know what Miracle Grow is, all right? It's kind of like having a carrot cake recipe. Which is more important, the carrots or the flour? Well, you kind of have to have both, right, to make that carrot cake. So the worm castings are not the Miracle Grow. They're part of the whole recipe. So you have compost, awesome. You may have compost that has nutrients in it that your plants can't take up because it's not broken down enough. So by adding the worm castings, they're going to break down that compost, and hopefully if that's what the nutrient the plant needs, it does so, and so the plant can take it up. I've had many people over the time say, well, I use, this bat guava, llama poop, this mixture. And I'm like, cool, that's great. All worm castings are going to do is help bring out the nutrients that's in there. So in the manure, it's locked. And like your compost, it's breaking down. So all worm castings are going to do is break it down further so that your plants can uptake it. So does that answer that feel like I answered that, Aaron?
I think that's a really good. I think that's a very good answer.
Okay.
See if Lydia has a follow-up question.
All right.
I really appreciate your distinction between fertilizer feeding plants and this kind of amendment feeding the soil, and that's again part of how you're answering this question about the compost, backyard compost. For instance, I do a lot of composting where I live too. I get a lot of compost actually from Maple City Market, and I feed it to our chickens, and our chickens pick through, I don't know, maybe a quarter of it, but most of it they can't quite manage, and so then the rest of it is left there for the worms and other things to work on, and some of it disappears more quickly and some of it not as quickly, and and then some of it I just add right into our garden. It's not quite broken down, but it'll continue to break down.
Oh, exactly. Oh, you're right, and that's so cool. I love hearing it because you're going to feed it. Everything breaks down at different levels. It's kind of like our food. Our food that we eat, some of it we have to chew it a lot harder than we do other things, and when it's really processed, it goes right through us a lot quicker, where the whole food, the plants, is the fiber that everybody talks about we need. And I feel that's true with the soil too. If it's too easy, this is, I don't know if I could put this up. Can you guys see that information with Wolf?
Not at the, okay, try it again.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Teresa had your information up just for a second.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's Wolf Co-op. So while you're holding that, this is kind of in line with what we were talking about. Another question here then is, approximately how many garden plants might you be able to amend with your castings You know, say like a 5-pound bag or a
Mhm.
25-pound bag. I
Yeah.
don't know if you have any kind of metric like that
Yeah.
to consider.
I
That's
know I
kind
get
of
this
tricky.
question all the time,
Okay.
and yeah, because people ask like, should they broadcast it? The worm castings all over. I'll say, yeah, because we'll sell you more worm castings, but you don't have to do that. It would be happy. I'll sell you a lot more, but you know what? You don't have to. Start small. Try 5 pounds, and just put a handful with a plant. When you plant it, mid-season, and then when the plant blooms, and then when it produces. I work with the quilt gardens, and so I've been working
Okay.
with the quilt gardens for I don't know how many years, and I still don't know how many bags each garden uses. So the beauty of it doesn't take a lot, but you don't have to use a whole bunch either. I feel just putting it with the plant is sufficient. Now I do, at the end of the year, I feel this is so important. I do broadcast it everywhere along with my compost in the fall. I thought, oh, they're just trying to sell me more worm poop. Who puts this stuff on in the fall, right? Because I was looking at it as fertilizer. But what it's doing is it's breaking down the soil to help feed those microbes. Those microbes, thank you, Steve Cruz. He taught me this. Those plants have been growing. You took this little tiny seed and it grew this massive plant, right? Those microbes are a little tired, they're a little worn out. So you want to replenish them. They're still living down in there. So by you giving them some compost, some worm castings, some organic matter, they're going to go into dormancy. So if it's a perennial, it's going to be fed in the fall and it's going to be healthier going into that winter. So when it comes out in the spring, it's already like, hey, yep, I still got some energy in there somewhere, you know? So,
That's great. That's great. And so, I mean, the idea is here that you're wanting to promote a soil ecosystem that
yeah.
is healthy, that is as sustainable as it possibly can be on its own. Of course, when you're gardening in any kind of intensity, it means that you're manipulating and taking a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
out, and
Right.
so the exchange has to be that as the gardener, as the human involved, here
Uh-huh.
is the way that you're putting something back to help again rebuild
Yeah.
the soil
Right.
structures,
Yeah.
so that any home gardener throughout
Mm-hmm.
Goshen, throughout the
Yeah.
Midwest, can can be building their soil, which builds their food production
Mm-hmm.
ultimately.
Right. Yeah. You keep that community. When you think about that world below you as a community, and it's networking every 3 feet. Remember that slide I showed you?
Yeah,
Every
right.
3 feet,
Yeah.
you're walking over a huge community. And when we go in and we spray it or till it or rototill it up, it's literally like an earthquake, a tornado, and a hurricane hitting the town of Goshen. So all at once. So can you imagine us trying to repair from that? It's going to take weeks before we get the water lines up, the electricity, the communication, the roads clear. So that's what you do when you mess up that soil food web below you. So when you knock it out of balance by whatever, don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. I get in and we dig. We have to get in there at some point, to put the plants in. But try not to disturb that soil a whole lot. Thank you, Matt Lynn. I don't know if he's taught me a lot of that.
Yeah.
Brett
Yeah.
Pepper has. There's so many people that just kept pounding this stuff into my head. I was a hygienist, for God's sake. I just played a little bit in the dirt, but it's these guys that just kept saying, telling me that. And it was like once that light bulb went off, it's like I get so excited when I can show people. And I do have a microscope, and I'm not comfortable enough like showing everybody and telling them what all those little things are. But oh my gosh, the first time Brett Pepper showed me my worm castings under the microscope, I felt like a mama. I was like, oh, there's bacteria, there's nematodes, I see them everywhere. So when you start looking at it's alive there, you start, you just treat it a little better. You don't try to
Good.
dominate it,
Yeah.
and work with it instead of doing what you think you wanted. Does that make sense?
That's great. Annette, could you show the Wolf Co-op card once again,
Oh,
please?
sure, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
And while you're showing that, let's see, why don't you tell us where can your worm castings be purchased? I've got a couple questions along that line.
Yeah, so I sell it to, we sell it, we sell it
And
to
why
about
don't you put the
60.
card back up there once more
Back
while
up.
you,
One more. Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. I have about 16 retailers in the Michiana area. So I don't have a sheet. Um, I, if I could tell you each name, but if they could contact me, I'll send them that list. I don't want to start shouting out names because it's not fair to everyone.
Okay,
But
that's
I
fair.
do sell, you know what I mean?
Yep.
We don't have a web page. I just have a Facebook page, and it's under the name of Raw Sustainable Living.
Yeah.
On that Facebook page, I have a list of all my retailers. So I do actually, yeah.
And
So, you know,
Teresa will put your information back up.
yes. So yeah,
Too,
call,
so.
text, email me, go on my Facebook page, and I'll send you, you know, a JPEG with all the retailers, you know, because I don't want to, yeah, I love them all. I've become good friends with them because they believed in me, and we you know, the worm castings have become more popular. So I don't want to take sales away from somebody and not the other.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, there you go. There you go.
There we go.
Yeah.
So is it possible to over amend the soil?
I don't know.
Okay.
That's a great
Fair.
question. You know, I don't know. Yeah, great question. I don't know. Yeah,
So I mean,
I don't. Yeah.
it is certainly possible to over fertilize, as you talked about. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
only so
So
much fertilizer NPK
right.
taken
Right.
up
Well. Yeah.
by a plant, by the
Yeah.
organism, and so the
Right.
rest just you
Yeah.
know, it washes washes
Right.
away.
If I, right. Yeah. And then, you know, I think my guess would be no. I'd go to one of my gurus to ask that question. To me, no. When you're amending the soil, you're just adding food for it and at different levels of decomposition, you know? So, you know, I think someone I got an email about the worm or chicken manure, you know, like I said, I don't feel that one does more than the other. You know, you can read about it, there's studies to prove that this manure is better than this manure, but that plant knows what it needs. You know, and it's going to do what it can to break down the nutrients that's around it. It's going to communicate with fungi and all these other processes saying, hey, I need this nutrient, I'll give you this exudate if you go get me these nutrients. They communicate with each other. They have to. Look at that web they're part of, you know? It's kind of like, you know, yeah, a business in Goshen saying, hey, we need fresh fruit. Okay, let's start some farms out here, you know? So in return, then we sell it for them. You know, it's networking.
Yeah, yeah.
That makes sense. But.
That's great. That's great. We are coming to the end of our time here, and
Okay.
the questions are. I think we've worked through the questions here too. So Annette, is there any last kind of something you'd like to leave us with?
Oh boy, no, I pretty much put it all out there, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. I mean, thank
Yeah.
you. I can't believe I heard you say somebody from Canada reached in. That's awesome. Anybody that took the time to spend it with me today, thank you. I miss you guys. I can't wait to get back out. I can't wait to get my hands dirtier and helping and seeing everybody, and opportunities like this are just priceless for somebody in our business and locally. So thank you for taking the time for doing it and having us. I'm truly honored from the bottom of my heart.
Annette, thank you so much for your time and your passion. That comes through beautifully, and your
Thanks.
wisdom. What we hope to be communicating, what I clearly hear you communicating to any and everybody is get out in the soil, start trying, and learn by trying, learn by trial and error. This is an important time for us to be thinking about our food systems, our food production and distribution systems. And the most basic way to address that is is to start with your own plot of ground.
Yeah.
If you don't have a plot of ground, the city is
Yeah.
working at developing some as well, and we hope to
Right.
have some more discussion about
Yeah.
that in some weeks to come.
Right. Well, Aaron, even just kind of building on that, a bucket, grow something in a bucket, an ice cream container, I mean, grow some herbs and put them in your window. It's better than anything, anything you could buy in a store.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
right.
you
That's
know,
right.
I mean, it's, if you go out and taste that tomato that grew outside, it's just amazing, and inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Oh.
Next week.